There's nothing quite like a primetime showcase between AFC East rivals, even if they're both 0-3.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Network. I'm Kyle Crabbs. He's John Butchko, host of Locked On Dolphins and Locked On Jets. And we're here to get you ready for a primetime showcase between the Miami Dolphins and the New York Jets. Two teams searching for their first win of the 2025 NFL season. Want to give you a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers here on the Locked On Network. It is your team's every day. We don't just say it, we live it. Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup plays. John, great to see you. We do this twice a year, and then we do the stuff in the summer. So we're getting our feet wet for the first time here, week 4 already. This quarter mark of the season. How are things going for you?
They're going well for me, not so well for the Jets. We, as you said, we got together during the summer to preview the AFC East, and these two teams had as many wins then as they do now.
Yep, it's been an discouraging start. Now, two teams that are in very different positions of their life cycle, right? I think that's worth mentioning. 0-3 for Miami feels different than 0-3 for the Jets because the Jets in season last year did the thing that we might see the Dolphins end up reverting to at some point this year, which is head coach change, general manager change, go through the full rebuilding cycle in the offseason to bring in a new football operation from top to bottom. So this Jets team, they gave the Bucs a scare with the blocked field goal return for a touchdown with Will McDonald in week 3. They gave the Steelers a scare in week 1, not so much against the Bills in week 2. What's the biggest storyline for you with these New York Jets through the first 3 weeks of the Aaron Glenn era?
The biggest storyline is frustration. The Jets were not expecting to be 0-3 at this point, even though they were starting out with a new coaching staff and a new front office. You can feel it in the fan base, and I don't think it's entirely fair because Aaron Glenn's in his first year. The roster has a lot of holes to it, but Aaron Glenn right now is bearing the weight of 14 years of frustration with this franchise, with this fan base. There were expectations that this team would be better than it is right now. Now they've faced tough opponents so far. Pittsburgh's 2-1, Buffalo and Tampa Bay both off to great starts. I mean, they haven't faced an easy game yet. They haven't faced a team that's really on their level yet. But I think that the question is, when are the Jets going to get a win? Because you already sense it in the fan base that there are questions starting to be asked. What's going on here? Is Aaron Glenn really the guy? I don't think these questions are fair. I've mentioned this on Locked On Jets, but I think that this team needs to get a win sooner rather than later to kind of calm some nerves in the fan base.
Yeah, it sounds very familiar to a Dolphins team that came in with a lot of new. Right? I mean, it was over 50% roster turnover from the previous year. They went from one of the oldest to one of the youngest rosters in football in one offseason. And a lot of that was not players with marquee investments. They tried to focus on the draft. They tried to be selective in free agency, but the entire secondary is brand new from what it was last year. And it showed. They're averaging almost 8 net yards per attempt through 3 games. It's just very porous. Now, there's been incremental progress for Miami, but it's that same sensation within the Dolphins fan base where, maybe if the Dolphins want a wild card game in 2023, the focus wouldn't be Mike McDaniel. It's the same old Dolphins. They haven't won a playoff game. Chris Greer's been here 20 years and they haven't won anything since. And, they took the step back and they regressed. It's a lot of angst. The same thing that you're talking about with Aaron Glenn paying for the sins of things that came before him that frankly have nothing to do with Aaron Glenn. There's things that Mike McDaniel has that are his problems. And there's things that Tua Tagovailoa is doing that are his problems. But the collective fan base is like, year 4 with a head coach, here we go again. We've regressed. And the team's fumbled away a game against the Patriots. The team failed to make the play at the end of the Buffalo Bills game, and they got ran over in week 1 against the Colts. So I think a lot of Dolphins fans would hear what you're saying, the sentiment and mentality is with the Jets and resonate with it because birds of a feather, right? We flock together, and that's where we're at. Give me another lead storyline for the Jets, whether that's the quarterback situation with Fields and concussion protocol versus Tyrod Taylor or something else.
Yeah, I think that we'll obviously keep our eyes on what happens with the Jets at quarterback this week. I thought Tyrod Taylor had a rough game against Tampa Bay. I think that had he put up a big performance and the Jets had won the game, maybe you stick with him as long as he's the hot hand. I don't think he was ever going to get the permanent job, but I think it may have been a situation where maybe the Jets ride him and would have ridden him until his play fell off. I don't think his play was at a high enough level. Now, he made some plays in the fourth quarter when Tampa Bay kind of backed off. The Bucs started calling off some of their blitzes that got to him earlier in the game. If Fields is cleared, he will play. And Aaron Glenn even confirmed that earlier in the week. But either way, quarterback has been kind of a question mark for the Jets this year. Fields had a very good performance week one against the Pittsburgh Steelers, had everybody around the team, everybody on the fan base excited about his performance. The question, has Fields finally put it all together? And then week two, he comes out and completes 3 passes against the Buffalo Bills. It was a really ugly performance. And, I'm sure we're going to get into this when we talk about some of the matchups and some of the keys to victory, but Fields and Taylor are 2 different styles of quarterback. Now they both have a degree of mobility. I think different types of mobility. Fields is a guy you can build a lot of design runs for. Tyrod's is more functional, where he can avoid pressure. I don't think you're going to build as many design runs in for Tyrod. But one thing they do have in common is they both hold the ball a long time. And opposing defenses have been effective at getting to the Jets quarterbacks with the blitz. And the offensive line has had some issues, particularly on the left side, picking up those blitzes. But some of it comes back to the quarterback holding onto the ball too long. And the Jets are going to have to come up with some solutions to get the ball out quicker in this game against Miami, no matter who the quarterback is. Now, I think it's going to be different. You'll see a different style offense, whether it's Fields or Taylor. With Fields, it can be a heavy run attack. You'll see the quarterback involved in the run game much more. With Taylor, you'll see a more conventional offense. It'll be built more on the drop back pass game. Taylor also is a guy historically who's been more willing to throw the ball down the field. So you'll see maybe a more traditional offense, but there are things that the Jets are going to need to figure out no matter which of these 2 guys is starting on Sunday.
And you're talking the Dolphins language.
Monday.
No team has blitzed more through the first 3 weeks, and Anthony Weaver's defense at 41% of reps. He's bringing extra pressure. Now, the effectiveness of that is a totally different story, and I think that's when we get into matchups and how that execution shows itself will be really interesting. But I think that's something the Jets will probably have in their back pocket, is you do need to have a different plan for Justin Fields than your plan for Tyrod Taylor. And I expect the Jets to kind of string that out as long as they can to force Miami to invest the extra time to prepare for it, because this is the same Justin Fields that back in 2022 in Chicago ran for 178 yards against the Dolphins defense, and Mike McDaniel's yelling at him on the sideline, telling him to stop running. So there's certainly matchups here that I think the Jets would be well served to kind of try to attack. And then from Miami's side of things, it's been about ball security. And I know that's a big issue with both of these teams. These are 2 of the 3 teams in the NFL that have yet to force a turnover through 3 games. We are joined by only the Washington Commanders, is the only other team that has not forced a turnover yet. These are the 2 worst teams in the league on a percentage of defensive drives that end in scores. For Miami, it's 66%. For the Jets, it's 55%. So stoppable force meets movable object really is the question for me of what side gets the breakthrough. I can't imagine that these teams are going to run up and down the field on each other. Nobody gets a turnover, and it's going to be a 35-32 football game. Maybe it is, and for an entertainment value, I'm sure the National Football League and ESPN wouldn't be too mad about it, and ABC. But that's certainly, as we look at the storylines, I think both of these teams have parallels. They're just at different places with the people running the organization. Now, what are the matchups to watch? We're going to get into that next here on this Crossover Thursday, so make sure you guys stick with us. NFL season is here and in full swing. FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love FanDuel because it fits however you like to play and bet, whether that's player props, same game parlays, spreads, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. Right now, the Dolphins at home are favored by 2.5 points against the New York Jets. So if that one way or another tickles your fancy, you can jump on it over FanDuel. Makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, easy. It's the best way to play and add a little extra energy to your Sunday. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. When you think game day, you might not think Wayfair, but you should, because Wayfair is the best kept secret for incredible and affordable game day finds. Wayfair has everything you need to get your game day man cave, woman cave space ready for the season. Whether you're tailgating outdoors, you're in the basement, you're in the living room, you name it. Maybe you're in the doghouse. I know they yelled at TV a few times. I get put in the doghouse here at my house. I got a little Dolphin stuff set up and get it furnished with Wayfair. So delivery is fast, easy, hassle-free, which is a lifesaver when you need something in time for kickoff. The outdoor essentials like folding chairs, patio heaters, the indoor must-haves like TV stands and serveware. Wayfair has it all in one place. Wayfair is your trusted destination for all things game day, from coolers to grills, recliners, slow cookers. Shop, save, and score today at wayfair.com. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. John, I'll give the floor to you here for a first matchup of note that has your attention.
Kyle, I'm going to do something unusual. Usually I'll go player versus player or sometimes coach versus coach, but I'm going to go back to something we touched on in the first segment. I think it's going to be the Dolphins blitz versus the Jets pass protection, because you said it. The Dolphins have been a very blitz-heavy team. The blitzes have not gotten home. The Jets have faced, I think, the second most blitzes in the NFL on offense this year, and they have really struggled to pick it up. It was a big issue against Tampa Bay. In fact, the Jets were down 26-6 in the fourth quarter of their game last week against the Bucs. At that point, heading into the fourth quarter, the Bucs had blitzed about 2/3 of the time. Todd Bowles called the blitz off in the fourth quarter. They got soft in their coverages. They only blitzed about 25% of the time in the fourth quarter. That's how the Jets started to mount their comeback. Bucs had something that was working, and they went away from it. The Jets have not had solutions to the blitz. In week 3 against Tampa Bay, the Jets got beat over and over by a slot blitz. They weren't adjusting to it. They weren't picking it up. They weren't adjusting to it. The Jets have to come up with solutions to the blitz. You have this one unit which has blitzed a lot and not been very successful. This other unit that's been blitzed at a lot and not been very successful. Well, something's got to give. One of these two units is going to be successful, and I think that's going to go a long way towards deciding who wins this game.
Yeah, I think about when the Jets have the ball in particular. Tackling has been a thing for Miami going back to last year, and I look at some of the skill players that the Jets do have, whether that is Justin Fields in space, whether that's Braylon Allen, who is a big supersized back who, if you're not fitting your gaps, that's the one concern that I have is this Jets offensive line, is their ability in the run game to create displacement. The Dolphins have a lot of young players up front. They got 2 rookies in the rotation on the defensive interior between Kenneth Grant and Jordan Phillips. And they've both had high water moments, but the disruption and splash, it's a step down from the standard that was set when it was Christian Wilkins and Zach Sealer for as long as it was. And then you replaced Wilkins with Calais Campbell, who's a savvy vet. And it came with a certain level of disruption on the interior that we simply haven't seen. And then you pair that with what the Jets have at offensive tackle with Fashanu and what they have in Membu. And if they're able to create knockback, the Dolphins' fits in the run game have to be more consistent than what they've been. In the first half against the Bills called 12 or 13 designed runs. They averaged 7.5 yards a carry. Now, it was not a game that got away from Miami. It was a 1-score game until the Bills kicked the field goal in the final 2 minutes. And in the second half, that number went down to 3.38 yards per carry on another 12 designed runs by backs. That's the kind of progress that you want to see when there's all the young players and all the pieces fitting together. But can you sustain that for 60 minutes against an offensive line that I think has a lot of talent? Like, John Simpson's a powerful player, right? And you've got Joe Tippmann, who's a well-rounded interior player. We mentioned those 2 offensive tackles. The talent exists there in New York, and you've got big backs with some explosiveness, especially with Breece Hall, that can make you pay. That's the matchup for me is the Dolphins, especially on early downs. You got to win the point of attack. You got to hold your gap. You got to tackle. If you do that, I think they're going to give themselves a chance to use that blitz package that they have and create that havoc on third down.
Kyle, I think that's a great point. I'll give you another matchup I've got. It's either Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle against Brandon Stevens. Sauce Gardner, we presume, is going to play, and he's going to get one of them. Sauce was in the concussion protocol during the Week 3 game against Tampa Bay, but he actually returned late in the game. It was something a lot of us missed until we caught the replay and watched the film. Brandon Stevens was one of the Jets' big signings this offseason. In fact, other than Justin Fields, he was the only guy that got big guarantees in free agency. They brought him in from Baltimore. They thought that they could make it work with him, and it has been dreadful. I don't know any other way to put it. I am sure Miami's been watching the film. I'm sure Mike McDaniel and Tua are watching the film, and they've seen defenses pick this guy apart. And there was a play on the goal line where the Jets inexplicably put Stevens one-on-one against Mike Evans. It was a run play. Baker Mayfield did the classic veteran quarterback move. He made the hand signal to Mike Evans, and they threw the ball to Mike Evans. I mean, I think Tampa Bay, I think Baker knew that that's an automatic touchdown, Mike Evans versus Brandon Stevens. I know Miami's offense has had some issues. Stevens is not a particularly fast corner. I think that either of these guys is going to give him issues. And I think that the number 2 corner spot has become an issue for the Jets. Sauce Gardner is off to a bit of an uneven start, but he's still a guy who's been a first-team All-Pro 2 of his 3 seasons in the NFL. He's a good fit for the scheme the Jets have put in, but I expect the Dolphins to really hunt for Brandon Stevens. I mean, things have been so bad for Stevens that even though he's the prize free agent signing, the Jets actually made a trade for a corner this week. They got Jarvis Brownlee from the Tennessee Titans. Brownlee's injured, though, so I don't think he's going to be in the lineup. I would not be surprised if Brownlee is starting in place of Stevens the next time these teams met. And this gives the Dolphins an opportunity. You go after Brandon Stevens because whichever of those 2 receivers is lined up against him is going to have a big mismatch.
Yeah, and thinking about these matchups between these 2 teams in years past, specifically when Tua's played, they made a habit of attacking DJ Reed and Michael Carter because they didn't want to test Sauce Gardner, right? So I think that's a great call out from your standpoint. The matchup that I have when the Dolphins have the ball is the Jets linebackers versus Devon Achane and Ollie Gordon. The Dolphins have an emerging second player with some physicality in between the tackles, which is a welcome change for the Dolphins with what it's been. And obviously Quincy Williams being out and set to miss time is a big loss for New York because he's an explosive, rangy player. He's one of the better players on the defense. And that puts that much more pressure on Jamien Sherwood to be the impact player. And the Dolphins have shown some life again, and they showed life against Buffalo with running the ball downhill. They averaged almost 5.5 yards per carry against Buffalo. And obviously the Jets, they made the trade for Harrison Phillips and brought him in to go with Quincy Williams or Quinnen Williams to give them a little bit more ceiling with what they have on the interior there. You're just looking for diversification of your run game if you're Miami, and you've got some really nice contributions from Ollie Gordon. And with one of the 2 players on the back on the second level of that Jets defense now set to miss some time, I think that's where you maybe try to stress and attack and probe. And the one thing that the Dolphins interior line has been good at has been displacement in the run game, where they made some personnel moves with the depth of their offensive line, and they draft Jonas Savaitai in the 2nd round. He's been a much better run blocker than he's been a pass protector, but there's been growing pains. Like, that's where Miami, I think, has to kind of earn those one-on-one Brandon Stevens versus either Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle matchups by being committed to attacking neutral and sometimes heavy boxes to kind of force the defense to creep up and that extra safety to roll down. I think that's a big matchup to watch here as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great call, Kyle.
So at this stage, we're going to get into our predictions and keys to victory for both the Jets and the Dolphins. Somebody's walking out of here with a dub. It's going to happen for somebody. And John and I are going to tell you what the keys are for both teams getting that done. That is next here on this Crossover Thursday. Make sure you guys stick with us. NFL season is back, and there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by the fans, cheering on your team. I would have to imagine if you're trying to get down to the Rock for Monday Night Football, you could find a few tickets out there, and you could take the stress out of buying tickets with Game Time. It gives the advantage back to you as fans trying to go to the game. It's fast, easy. It's backed by the Game Time guarantee. You always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time at the best price, plus all fees are included. So the price you see is the price you pay. I love the panoramic seat views, so there's no surprises. What you can click and see exactly what kind of sight lines you're signing yourself up before you buy the tickets. And as we mentioned, with the Game Time 100% authentic ticket pricing, there are no surprise fees. That what you see is what's in your cart when you go to check out. It's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other way that you can buy your tickets. So download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. That's promo code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. John, I will give the floor to you here. 3 keys to victory for the New York Jets. What does that look like, and which one is maybe the most probable or the least probable in your eyes for the Jets to achieve?
Okay, my number one key is I think the Jets need to get their screen game working. It really has not been a part of the offense so far, and that's been a surprise to me because the Jets have 3 backs who can catch the football in Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, and Isaiah Davis. And the rest of the pass catching group is kind of deficient in talent. So Garrett Wilson's obviously a very good number 1 receiver, but nobody's really emerged as the number 2 receiver in the offense. At tight end, you have a player who has a lot of promise in Mason Taylor, but he's still a work in progress. He's a rookie. He's a second-round pick. It's probably going to take some time for Mason Taylor to get going. By the way, Mason Taylor is the son of Dolphins Hall of Famer Jason Taylor and the nephew of Zach Thomas, so a guy who's got Dolphins ties as well. But we talked a little bit earlier. One of the things I said was the Jets need to come up with solutions for the blitz. And one of the best solutions you can have against the blitz is a screen pass. The Jets tried to use a couple screen passes in the Tampa Bay game. I don't think that they were super well designed. I think those sometimes you see plays where you can envision like the coach working on the chalkboard. He thinks this is a great idea. And then you get on the field, it doesn't work quite as well. There were a couple of times where I think they asked Armand Membu to cover too much ground to try and throw a block on a wide receiver screen. And I imagine like Tanner Engstrand, the offensive coordinator, was, he was kind of in his office. He thinks, oh, we have the super athletic guy we just drafted out of Missouri. He can hit this block. And as athletic as Membu is, they probably asked him to do a little bit too much. So I think part of it, they have to scheme up their screens a little bit better, but they really haven't leaned into it the way I thought they would as part of this offense. And I think that's part of the reason that they've struggled to deal with these blitzes. So that's number 1 for me. Number 2 is I think the Jets are going to have to play a lot of zone in this game for the reasons I mentioned. They got issues with Brandon Stevens. I think that this Miami receiving group, the speed that they possess, would give the Jets issues if they play too much one-on-one man coverage. Aaron Glenn loves to play man coverage. He loves to blitz. I think the Jets are going to have to take their foot off the pedal a little bit. Again, I know like the season's not, I know things haven't been going great on the Miami offense, but Jets defense has not been functioning at a high level. And their style, I think, plays into Miami's hands. So I think that they will have, I think they're going to have issues if they try and play a lot of man coverage. And the third, force a turnover. I mean, it's unbelievable how the Jets haven't been able to force a turnover. I mean, some of this has been ridiculous luck. I mean, there have been a couple of fumbles where like guy fumbles and the ball like bounces to where 3 of the opponents are and no Jets are. But the Jets also dropped some interceptions in week 1. Brandon Stevens and Michael Carter II both dropped interceptable passes by Aaron Rodgers. Either of those could have really swung that game against Pittsburgh. So, there's some randomness involved in turnovers, but there's also been situations where the Jets have not been taking advantage of opportunities that have presented themselves. And I think of these 3, the most likely is the Jets are going to start relying on the screen game because they need to come up with some answers on offense, not just against the blitz. I mean, I think this offense has struggled for large portions of the last 2 games. I mean, they only really got things going in the fourth quarter against Tampa Bay after the Bucs kind of backed off and started playing prevent looks. And I just think like if you look at this personnel, there aren't really many other places the Jets can go other than starting to get the running backs more involved. And I think that primarily will be on the screen game. So that I think those are the 3 things I'm looking at from the Jets perspective in this one.
Yeah, I think for me, the first one is you have to remove the bonehead play on special teams. The Dolphins, the last 2 weeks, they had a punt return for a touchdown, and on the ensuing kickoff, it gave up a touchdown on the ensuing kickoff and gave it right back. It looked like the kick wasn't quite right. It looked like that you had a missed tackle opportunity in the hole. Looked like you didn't have good pursuit angles initially on the play because the kick was wrong. So that's one. And then it's 21-21 midway through the fourth quarter. And Zach Sealer roughs the punter on your third consecutive punt against Josh Allen, and you gave him the ball on after that punt. The Bills got the ball back because of the penalty on the plus 36-yard line. I'll give you one guess what happened with that. You make those mistakes against the Bills, they're going to score touchdowns. And that was the deciding score in the game when it was all said and done. So you can't beat yourself in the phase of the game in which the Dolphins have actually shown a lot of really good hitting yardage and field position elements to their special teams unit. And that's not been the case. They made the change this year from Danny Crossman to Craig Aukerman. I think if you remove those two special teams mishaps, the special teams unit would be the best performing unit on the team. Now, those things happened, so I can't say that. But if you can remove that critical error trying to be extra and do too much, I think special teams can be an element where the Dolphins could potentially have an edge because they've otherwise played well through the first 3 weeks. I think on offense, the big point of emphasis for me is I want to try to get Jalen Waddle more involved in the offense. Tyreek Hill, they had the running game going. Tyreek Hill finishes the week 3 game against Buffalo with 10 targets. Jalen Waddle has 6. Waddle's the guy that spent the whole offseason program as the number 1 with Tua because Tyreek had wrist surgery. And then Tyreek had a hip flexor or a low back or whatever it was, and he missed almost all of training camp. And then you get back into the games and we're force feeding Tyreek Hill the football again. I think it's one of those things where I think the primary key to success is running the ball. But from a passing game perspective, I think as we've outlined with the matchups, if the Jets are going to say we're going to play Sauce Gardner over top of Tyreek Hill, then Jalen Waddle needs a heavier dosage and volume of targets than what he has been getting through the first 3 weeks. And he was effective with the targets that he's gotten the last 2 weeks. With the touchdown catch and running by a pressed up corner and getting outside of a safety in a cover 2 look with the corner clouded up against the Patriots and a bunch of outbreaking routes. Teams are like giving the Dolphins those outside the numbers throws, and Waddle's creating separation and taking them. So that's another one for me. And then defensively, I think this has to start with first down run defense. You have to earn the right to rush the passer. It's a phrase that a couple of members of the Dolphins locker room have said for years. And, the Dolphins, when the Bills were faced with 3rd and 3 or less, they were 6 for 6 on conversion opportunities. When it was 7 or more yards, the Bills were 0 for 5. And sometimes it can just be as simple as that. And I think it has to be as simple as that for Miami because their 3rd and 4th down defense has been horrible, but it's because teams have been living in short yardage situations on 3rd downs against them. So I think you have to force those long and late down opportunities, and you do that by winning on 1st and 10. So those are my keys to victory. I think the most likely of those to happen, look, just don't do something silly on special teams. That should not be too hard to ask. I think the toughest one is the Jets. I think the strength of their offensive roster does lie with the physicality and athleticism of those guys up front. I think that can really test Miami in that regard. That is going to do it for us here on this crossover Thursday ahead of Monday Night Football. Dolphins hosting Jets. We get our first look at one of these rivalries uniforms. Dolphins are wearing their deep blues that everybody thinks is black. It's like that black and blue versus gold and yellow dress. Everybody sees a different combination of colors with these Dolphins uniforms. You could judge for yourself on Monday Night Football. Make sure you stay plugged in with John over on Locked On Jets, me here on Locked On Dolphins, and we will keep you covered every step of the way in the lead up, post game, and all season long here on the Locked On Podcast Network because it is your teams every day. We appreciate you guys for checking out the show. Come on back. See us again soon. That's it for us here. We're out of here.